Hello, Endersword here again. Just wanted to talk a little bit more about GME and specifically what a short squeeze actually is and kind of how the mechanisms of that really work. So, there's been a lot of, I think, misconceptions about it, about how, like, a short position, I've seen a lot of people say, like, you have to wait until it expires. A short position doesn't expire unless it's an option, but that's not what we're talking about. It's the stock, so they can keep it forever. The thing that stops them from keeping it forever is what is called margin requirement or capital requirement that they require to keep the position going. When you take out a position on a short, you're basically saying, I'm going to short the stock at 30, and I now have to put in an additional 30%. So I sold a bunch of shares at $30. That $30 is now sitting in my account. I have to then put up an additional 30% on top of it. So I actually need to keep $39 in that account. And then the idea of this being that if one day the stock is above that amount and I can't put additional money in, then I must close my position out. I'm forced to close it out if I can't continue to defend it. And you can see very quickly, despite the fact that I only put $9 of my own money in, if that all of a sudden went from $60, from $30 to $60, it's doubled in price. But what I have to put up in addition is now going to be $78 in total, which means out of my original 9 plus the 30 for 39, I now have to come up with 78. I need to put in an additional $39 of my own money on top of that, just to maintain what my position is. So I basically spent now more than more than 4 times my original investment here to just maintain it. So eventually you run out of money and you can't do that anymore. So the way that I kind of visualize this is, imagine that someone has kind of built a little fortress around the shares that they want to short. The way that I usually see something like supply and demand is kind of like a faucet pouring money in, being your demand for a stock. And then there is always some little drain, which is going to be the amount that people want to sell and get the money out. This is very crude, very simple, but the concept kind of makes sense. And if your demand increases more than your basically supply of people that want to sell it, then this little area of water is going to go up. And if it's the other way around, then it's going to go down. So the idea is, if more people want to buy in at higher and higher prices, then they're going to. And if people are demanding higher and higher prices before they will sell, then that's going to rise. If vice versa, that's going to drop. But what happens is, if we've got this sitting around this rate, let's say that this water level right here is $30, then the people in their little fort must keep $30 worth of water plus their $9 worth of water on top of it. And that's their extra margin. What we want to do to force them out of this position is to continue to have the water level rise such that they have to either increase the amount of water that they're holding in their tank more and more and more to try and keep up with our increase in the value, or get to a point where our water level is now overflowing their tank and it's gonna knock down their walls. Basically, it's just gonna break through like a dam. So there comes a point, if someone bought in, or let's say they shorted the stock at 30, and a lot of people that had shorted this stock, a lot of the funds did it at $10, $15, $20 quite a long time ago. But let's give them the benefit of the doubt and say 30, because that's what I wrote down already. So if they wanted to defend that up to $40, they could. Up to $50, they could. And then beyond that, they were like, you know what? We either give up or we're out of money. We're taking down the walls. You guys, you can have it. Basically, what happens is they are now forced to buy back all their shares. So all the water that they've been storing now floods into your original little water basin. So suddenly this inflow is completely going nuts. And then the idea is that this is supposed to then create a bit of a chain reaction where people with bigger positions and better defended positions end up with this water level rising and rising and rising. And each time we end up breaking their little water reserve area, we get to add their water to our water because they're forced to use their water that they had stored, which is the money, the margin that they had there. They're forced to flood it back into the market. That represents a loss to them. That is, except for the original amount that they sold, if they sold this or bought it back, sorry, at the $78, the 30 is what they got originally, but the rest of it, that $48, is a complete loss to them. So we basically use their loss to refinance and kind of re-energize our original little water flow. And soon we've just got this little tsunami going. And the whole idea is that that's what happens, that as this water gets released, you raise the water level, raise the water level, raise the water level, and then take over the entire thing. The word of caution into the future, though, is let's say this was up until the end of January and our water level was at a lovely, 300 and plus, let's say, meters here. Now, we've run out of guys to collapse, or the guys that are left weren't going to collapse at that level. They're fine. So then the water level, losing some of that momentum, started to trickle down. And we kind of settled at a new water level, a bit lower, quite a fair bit lower. But the new thing, now people are like, well, let's just do it again. I bet that people shorted the stock during this whole period. There's a lot of people that conspiratorially think that the people that let their dam break didn't really let their dam break and it was all a trick and stuff like that. That's really dumb, but that's a whole other video. I think the majority of them did just take their loss and really had no choice to it because they couldn't afford to keep it. But what had happened is during the whole time that this was up this high, it is true that some people were now selling at the new higher value at $300, meaning that their original little refuge of water was built at 390 if they did it at 300 or whatever they did it at. I'd say the average one probably got in at like 2 something. But it means that down the line, we're now coming at the edge of their fort with a value of like $60, but their reserve to push against it is at 390. So basically, you're now quite literally running into a brick wall. That you've got a whole bunch of these new entities that even their starting position is at the 390, and you can be pretty sure that anyone that decided to enter it during this whole friggin' mess has the capacity to make their own walls higher. They have the capacity to defend this up to 5, 6, 7, 800. Some of them are like essentially almost infinite depth if they feel like it. It's just a matter of what their own risk tolerance is. For a company like the Melvin Capitals, which are relatively small in comparison, I know a lot of people don't think of $13 billion assets under management as small, but put that in perspective of like hedge funds are small. Put that like a real fund company, and not that they're not real, but like BlackRock, Vanguard, Fidelity, some big things like that, which by the way are actually huge holders of GameStop, so they're probably not short. They're quite a bit long. The three of them own 40% combined. But if you add up their three assets under management, it's $20 trillion. It's literally 1,000 times the size of some of the hedge funds that people are talking about. So their ability to build these walls is essentially infinite because they can, if they so feel like it, they could just bookmark like $100 billion for it, and you're nowhere near that. So they're never going to be forced out of their position. So the real thing going forward is whether or not you think that these new walls were built at a very, very high level, or whether or not some people were still limping through with the lower walls and just covering it with their own capital. I think it's very much the former, that you're going to find that the people that are shorting now are doing it at a much higher rate and did the original sell at a higher level than the people did originally. They're trying to defend $10, $20, $30 and get killed. The people trying to defend $200, $250, $300, they're going to be just fine. And I think people need to understand that mechanic, that if you really think you can create a short squeeze again, I think you just need to understand how big of a gap you need to fill in, how much new water you need to get to before you even start to breach the limits of their walls. So you could still do that. I'm not going to discourage anyone from doing anything, but I think people just need to see that that's the reality of the situation. And if you happen to see something now that says the short interest is 120% this week, and you say, well, that's the same as it was 3 weeks ago, to understand that it's fundamentally different. The 120% is in huge fortresses instead of in little shacks. And that's what you've got to overcome. Thanks for watching. I hope that helps somebody.